Mr. Speaker.
I call Alfred
Mr. Speaker, I rise to take a call on this bill, and I want to acknowledge my good friend and colleague Mark Mitchell, who this bill is in. It's the Social Security Stopping Benefit Payments for Offenders Who Repeatedly Fail to Comply with Community Senators Amendment Bill, under the name of the member, the National MP Mark Mitchell for Rodney. And Mr. Speaker, there were some very unkind comments that were made about the sincerity and the intent of Mr. Mark Mitchell in regards to this bill. But Mr. Speaker, we know that his past history is that he's been involved in the police as a previous dog handler, and though Mr. Mark Mitchell did actually make comment and tweeted about an incident where there was a moment there, but he was very involved in the police, and so he knows the importance of the role that both police, corrections play in our communities as well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do think, though, it was very unkind, because when the previous member spoke about the lack of support from the Labor, I know that Calvin Davis, the spokesman for corrections, actually looked at us, and in his eyes he was saying, I actually support this bill. I support this bill. In fact, that member, as the Speaker of Corrections, I must say, he goes to very unusual lengths to investigate the roles of corrections, and it was some 3 months ago we did the Shave for Cure, and the intent was for the Blood Cancer and Leukemia Foundation, in which we shaved all they had. But both Mark Mitchell and I believe it was a way for him to have an inside job of heading into corrections, into Serco, so he gets some added information. I'm not sure if it worked. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, back to the scope of the bill. Mr. Speaker, we do know that there are 28,562 offenders that are on community service. 28,562. But Mr. Speaker, so we are talking about those with a non-custodial sentence. We're talking about those in which the court has felt fit that the appropriate place for them is not to be incarcerated, but instead a non-custodial sentence gives them an opportunity. It mitigates the offending and allows them to have a process of rehabilitation to be able to again integrate back into community to a normal way of life. And so therefore, at the same time too, it also implies that there are some conditions that are really important, and those are often bail conditions. Most of us would agree with that. In fact, all of us would agree that that's really important. The parts then I can't quite understand why there's not the support, because this is a tool that in the hands of corrections, along with MSDs, ensures that there is some compliance. Now, for those of you that are out there that say that this is not right, in fact, the member previously said this is again what you call bashing of beneficiaries, being unkind to those in there. But in actual fact, the member needs to realise we are talking about those who have offended, who actually have broken the law, but who've been given an opportunity with a community sentence to be able to comply, but also to reintegrate back into community or become a normal part of citizens in our communities as well. So therefore, when they don't comply, not just the first time, not the second time, but the third time, we're talking about 3 times where there's been non-compliance. We're talking about a tool in which the corrections have tried to engage. They've tried to ensure that they are complying. Now, when does it get to a point that even Calvin Davis will know that as Mark Mitchell is putting this bill through, it's simply saying this: you've got to be compliant. In other words, if you do the crime, you've got to do the time. If you're not doing the time, then you've got to comply. That's the simple basis of this bill, okay? And all it does to amend the Social Security Act of 1964 is to ensure that they would comply. What is wrong with this bill? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'd like the next speaker from the Labor side to tell us the essence of what's wrong with this bill. They can't. They can't. Instead, they go outside the scope, sort of faffle all around about a whole lot of other ideas, but when it comes to the intent of this bill, there is nothing wrong. Chris Farfoy knows that Mark Mitchell is right about this bill. This is a good bill. Mr. Speaker, I finish off with this, because a little bit of facts and figures. Here's some numbers for you. In 2014, the bill that Mark Mitchell talked about in regards to the welfare reforms for the social sanctions ensured that there was 2,804 benefits that were suspended and sanctioned. Mr. Speaker, when you think about 28,000, when you think about 2,000, this is not hard or mean-spirited. This is ensured that we make people comply. Mr. Speaker, I look forward as the chairperson to receive Mark Mitchell's bill, to ensure that the fact is that we do due diligence to hear the submissions throughout this process and ensure that it returns back to the House in a way that, again, it may be a small bill or a simple bill, but with Mark Mitchell and his support and what we're doing, Mr. Speaker, this bill will truly make a difference. Thank you.